Bayonetta is an action hack and slash game originally being released in Europe in 2010. I know this because I played Bayonetta 14 years ago on its release day. It was ported to the PlayStation 4 in 2020 and to my delight recently went on sale. So ladies and gentlemen, we're diving into a retrospective review of Bayonetta. When the game begins, we're introduced to two clans, being the Umbra Witches and Lumen Sages. Now they worked in tandem as overseers of power, but this harmony was disrupted, resulting in both clans going to war. This results in all of the witches being eradicated, well, all of them except for one of course. Many years later, a casket is recovered from a lake containing Bayonetta. Now she's lost her memory and can only remember that she's a witch. All of this is happening whilst there's a power struggle between heaven and hell. Bayonetta is trying to figure out what happened in her past while also partaking in a divine battle between dimensions. Bayonetta can throw a quick punch, a more powerful kick, as well as combine the two for a multitude of different combinations. Now she has a very unique set of tools as she has pistols attached to her heels, and yes, these are very cool. You can of course use your pistols as well as extending your combo meter by holding down and attacking input. Bayonetta can dodge attacks. Now this is nothing new, but more importantly she can use Witch Time, which is basically a perfect dodge. Now Witch Time slows the game down momentarily and allows you to get some good damage in on enemies. Their weapons will typically glow to let you know that you need to dodge, and you'll need to dodge at the last moment to activate Witch Time. However, the window is very generous, so don't worry about pinpoint accuracy. You also have access to Wicked Weave attacks. Now these are slightly more powerful attacks, usually at the end of a combo. Bayonetta will use her hair to summon demons to use in battle. I would always try to end a combo with a Wicked Weave. There's a health and magic gauge on screen. Now your health can be replenished by using items or upon your death. Your magic gauge allows you to use cinematic torture attacks, which show a cutscene of you obliterating your enemy whilst also doing a considerable amount of damage. You have an inventory menu where you can manage your weapons, as you unlock them of course, use items as well as craft items yourself. Now Bayonetta can collect ingredients in game that allow her to concoct recipes. These include healing, attack boosting and defensive lollipops. Yes, lollipops. Bayonetta has one in most scenes. Killing enemies provides you with halos, which are the game's form of currency. You can use them to spend at your buddy Rodin's shop, the Gates of Hell. Here you can buy new techniques, weapons, items as well as accessories. Now the game is formed by multiple chapters, with each chapter being split into verses. At the end of each verse you'll be awarded a medal. Now these medals range from stone being the worst to pure platinum being the best. The medal you receive factors in your combo score, items used and the damage you receive, to name a few. Now if you play like me you'll be seeing stone award after stone award, but don't let that put you down. How well you perform in each verse will dictate the overall reward you receive at the end of each chapter. Dying repeatedly does punish this award big time. Speaking of death, when you do eventually die you respawn at the last checkpoint. Now the checkpoints are very generous, it never feels like you have to backtrack and you pretty much just redo the encounter that you died in. I always like this because you could jump straight back into the fight, using what you learned to do even better. The cutscenes in the game are fantastic. They're humorous, very sexualized and don't take themselves too seriously.
How about we have a little fun instead? You did plan on having fun with me, right? There'll be plenty of time for pillow talk afterwards.
Bayonetta has witty dialogue and banter, gets herself into very provocative positions, and reveals the goods whenever possible. It was a laugh back in 2010 and it's a good laugh in 2024. Internet, please do not cancel me. Now there are some characters you'll meet throughout the story, in Rodin, a fallen angel who acts as your weapon dealer, Enzo who's your information broker, and Luca who's a journalist looking for answers. Bayonetta's original voice actor Helena Taylor gives a 10 out of 10 performance in the game, so much so that the other voice actors are completely blown away, and that is saying a lot.
You've quite the familiar face, and using the same powers, but you'll have to forgive me. Do we know each other?
The background music fits the game like my hand in an expensive glove that I can't afford. Well, you know what I mean. Yeah, it's great.
Order. Well, let me give you back your toy then.
Let's get straight onto one of the game's biggest selling points, and yes, points plural, as this game gets a lot right. The combat is excellent, it's free-flowing, responsive, and more importantly, it's fun. From the first chapter, the game hands you a bunch of combos and inputs and says, hey, do what you want. The combos aren't overbearing, in fact they're relatively simple, and the simplicity was implemented well. Bayonetta on normal difficulty presents a fair challenge. The enemies aren't pushovers, but they also aren't overbearing. I found the majority of the deaths came from not knowing an enemy attack pattern or mechanic, and once having a better understanding, being able to progress without any issues. The rest of my deaths were simply due to attrition and a lack of healing items. Your health is constantly being chipped away, and you will eventually die as you're not stacked with healing items in the first place. There's a fair amount of enemy variety, from your run-of-the-mill trash mob, larger enemies with wide arcing attacks, as well as the bizarre like floating ships that shoot homing rockets at you. It's the bosses that are extremely bizarre looking. Now I'm not sure where Platinum got the inspiration for these bosses, but they definitely add to the nostalgia of the game. There are several weapons and techniques that you can kit Bayonetta out with. Now most of these are brought in this store from Rodin, whereas others are obtained by gathering records in the game and exchanging them in the gates of hell. Now some records are missable, but the majority that are tied to weapons are obtained through story progression. My favourite weapon was the shuriba, which is the katana. I did try the whip as well as a few others, but I found the shuriba to be the most effective. There's a good amount of variety with the game world locations. For example, Bayonetta will be running from a wave of lava throughout the city, riding on a motorcycle whilst doing battle, and being in another dimension entirely. Just to backtrack, yes, there is one mission where you'll be on a motorcycle whilst having to shoot and evade enemy attacks. Now the bike handles well, and you'll need to jump over obstacles and slide through closing doors at the last possible second. This chapter was a breakup from the traditional combat and was just as fun as it was several years ago. Bayonetta will use her Wicked Weave ability to use climax finishes on bosses to damage them. Now these are quick time events where you have to mash a button, which is accommodated by a comical cutscene of you tearing a limb off or killing them. These were a big hallmark, and when I think of Bayonetta, these climax finishes come to mind. There's also Alfheim portals that serve as the game's challenge mode. You'll find these scattered around some levels, but they don't stick out, so you will have to hunt them down. Some of these challenges include killing all enemies while only using witch time, only using a certain number of attacks, and killing all enemies within a time limit. You either get a health or magic upgrade item on completion. The story is told in the form of still cutscenes as well as animated cutscenes. Some of these are several minutes long and do help to immerse you within the game world. Without spoiling any story elements, there is a lot of character development within Bayonetta which I did like. There are some light platforming sections, and I mean very light. I did find that the controls weren't as refined as the combat, but I mean this isn't a platformer, so that's fine in my book. The combat's nice and gory, which nowadays developers try and stay away from, so if you want to see some creative enemy deaths, Bayonetta is definitely the game for you. When you complete the game, you do unlock access to hard difficulty and a few other things that I won't spoil. Now I've had two things on my to-do list for many years now. One was to play Bayonetta again, and the second was to complete the game on hard. Now I'm not sure how difficult it's going to be, so let me know in the comments if there's any strategies or accessories that you'd recommend. There's essentially a new game plus, as when you complete the game you can use your current save file to play again on hard difficulty. Now you keep all of your techniques, treasures and weapons obtained during your initial playthrough. This will allow you to go ahead and obtain the rest of the records, Alfheim challenges and trophies that you may have missed out on. You can also view your play history. Now this shows you all of the chapters that you've completed on each difficulty, whilst also highlighting the award trophy that you obtained. Now yes, I know most of mine are stone, I don't need reminding. The game took me approximately 16 hours to roll the end cutscenes. I wasn't in a rush and did try to explore as much as I possibly could. Bayonetta is 14 years old and really does set the bar high. It puts recent releases to shame in several different categories, and I would wager that Bayonetta will still put modern releases to shame in another 10 years. This was released in an era where single player DLCs weren't as prevalent as what they are now. I was begging for DLC when this game came out. I would have given Platinum Games my wallet and said go to town. Well, not go to town on me obviously, and not go to town on my wallet because that would be pretty weird. And also that would be slightly I paid $4.99 for Bayonetta as it's currently 75% off in the PlayStation Network store, and I thought that's a great deal. I still have my original Xbox 360 version sitting on my shelf, gathering dust. Bayonetta is truly deserving of the title Masterpiece. Now that's highly subjective and I would agree, so let me rephrase that and say it's a masterpiece to me. I recommend the game to everyone. Now the game has several difficulty settings, so don't be put off in that regard. There's no microtransactions for skins or loot boxes for weapons, but I promise you, you will have fun, and in a year, or maybe even two, you'll think to yourself, man, Bayonetta was a classic. Thank you for checking out my Bayonetta review. Now some of you may be wondering why I'm not covering a new release. Well, by the time you're watching this, I'll be recovering from a minor surgery, so I've bought a few games and recorded and edited these well in advance to ensure that you have your weekly content. There will be one more retro game next week, and after that I should be back to reviewing new releases again. If you liked or disliked my review, please leave your preferred interaction. If you have anything to say about the game, I'd love to hear your comments, and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. I'm Chen Your Donut, and I'll be back real soon.